They would not cooperate, and so the Spanish prevailed. By the 1590s, however, despite all this, these skirmishes, there were small outposts of missions running up the northeast Atlantic coast. There were about 6 or 7, depending on how you're counting. Some of them, they move a lot, so it's hard to kind of figure out which is which. However, in 1597, this whole line of missions here that existed was destroyed in the Juanillo Rebellion. And Juanillo was a chief on St. Catherine's Island, a Wali chief, and he was supposed to become the next chief of Wali. The Spanish intervened because Juanillo was polygamous, and they didn't want a polygamous chief, although the rights of elites in all southeastern tribes were that chiefs could have more than one wife. And when they attempted to interfere with this, the whole Wali coast went up in flames. People got in their canoes and they went down from mission to mission to mission and set them on fire. They were only stopped at San Juan, don't want to get this wrong, San Pedro de Mocamo, which is on Cumberland Island, and that's a border between Wali, the Wali chiefdoms, and Mocama, the Mocama, which is an eastern Timucua tribe. That's where they were stopped and turned back. This is the only instance of cooperation among the disparate Wali chiefdoms. But it still didn't work, because they couldn't get the Mocama to go with them. The Spanish retaliated. It was awful. They went by and burned all the fields that they could find up and down the coast. The Wali were forced into the interior. This was a period of drought, so between famine and disease, there was sort of a major capitulation all along the coast, and by 1600, everybody was essentially obedient to the Spanish crown. Everybody went down to St. Augustine, got some gifts. They were always on tap. You could get these gifts. And they vowed obedience to the Spanish crown. And then after this was the so-called golden age of missions, though there was never really much of a golden age. Still, there was a new chain of missions that came up the coast between 1560, after 1597. By 1600, there got a new chain of missions up there between St. Augustine and the sister city, Santa Elena. I'm a little bit off here. And in 1633, just parenthetically, folks began to expand missions into the Western Timucua and Appalachia territory at the request of the Western Timucua. So things are very different at this point.
Excuse me, at that time, were the tribes cooperating? Was there a greater degree of cooperation?
Between them?
Yes.
No. No.
Now, one other question. The area that they were spreading into, that's over in the Appalachian type of area.
Right, right. So before 1633, all the action was on the lower Atlantic coast.
On the Timucuan area.
Yeah, and then they start again. They were requested. Yes.
What is the Iberian Peninsula?
I'm sorry, Spain.
Spain.
Spain and Portugal. I apologize. But see, you can't say Spain and Portugal because they're not Spain and Portugal at the time.
I'm an engineer, so I didn't.
We can go back and look at the Iberian Peninsula for a minute if you want, just to get, anyway. So you did get a functioning mission system between about 1600 and 1680s. There, if you've read anything about the Santa Catalina mission, the main mission of Wali, where the main chief, the paramount chief of Wali existed, the mission there looked to be quite profitable. The cemetery was replete with high quality trade goods and the 400 individuals that are buried there. The kitchen appeared to be a major workhouse area where deer and other animals were prepared, probably for shipment down to St. Augustine and other people. This was a thriving place, more so than any other mission that's been excavated. But they were having problems. By the 1680s, Native American tribes that were allied with the British began to poke their heads down into Spanish territory with the idea of throwing the Spanish completely out of the New World. The French are still cruising up and down the coast as pirates, And that scared the bejesus out of it. They were more scared of the French pirates than they really were of the British guys. And the Spanish just by 1684 decided that they could not hold the Georgia coast anymore. So at this point, if you're a Native American, you're either allied with the British or you're allied with the Spanish. And so all the folks that were missionized came down with the Spanish, left Santa Catalina, left all these other missions, grouped up on Sapelo Island for a year or two. This is kind of blurry when you're that close. Here's Sapelo right here. And then a couple years later, everyone withdrew below the river here, and the Wally Indians from Santa Catalina and Sapelo settled on Amelia Island, at Amelia Island Plantation, on Harrison Creek, just that way. Just to, the other that way? That way. Sorry about that. That way? Okay.
What year was this, about when?
1684.
Okay.
Just to finish the story, the missions that were moved down here, at least as far as we can tell, were not ever very profitable. The Native Americans, while they were ostensibly allied with the Spanish, did a lot of foot dragging when they wanted them to do labor products. They'd say, well, you know, there's not enough wood to do that, and we don't have enough people, and we need to plant crops, and so we can't build this stockade right now, and of course, the end of the story is that in 1702, the British, again out of South Carolina, again determined to throw the Spanish out of the New World, came down and systematically sacked every one of these missions. There was not a tremendous loss of life. There were alarms, there were watchtowers on the northern ends of all these islands. They set up the alarm, everybody would run down to the mission, they'd get in canoes and go down to the next island. They'd sound the alarm, and over a period of just 2 days, everybody ended up in the Castillo de San Marcos, about 1,000 people and the cows, and stayed out there for a number of months, really, until just by chance a fleet of Spanish ships showed up, and the British got scared away. And the Governor Moore, who was in charge of this whole thing, actually sort of lost a lot of reputation there because the whole thing was so expensive that South Carolina had to print paper money for the first time. So he later tried to beat up on the Western missions and succeeded there. In any event, so that's the background. So the reason these missions were established is, again, that this was a tried and true way to hold territory during the Reconquista. The priests, these lowly priests, these little guys in robes and bare feet and little knotted sashes and things, are supposed to subdue the country through religion. They were sometimes given a garrison of soldiers, but shortly after, they would usually ask that the garrison be removed because they were more trouble than they were worth. They would steal food from the Indians. They would steal lots of things from the Indians. They were just not nice guys in general. Again, the Native Americans, under control of the priests, would then do all the labor projects. They would provide all the agriculture and subsistence items, again, organized out of the missions. They're doing all the farming and all the labor. And of course, they're supposed to be converted, and so they'll become nice, religious Spanish peasants. There was a different system in Latin America that you might, it was called the encomienda system. And that was where they'd give a big guy a big piece of land and say, you go and you're responsible for these Native Americans. And you're responsible for their conversion and all this stuff. And what happened is you got a bunch of feudal territories in Latin America, a situation that still has not completely gone away in Latin America. You have these territories, these big families in Latin America that hold territory through violence or other means. And of course, I stuck this in here. This is the feudal lord oath to the king during medieval times as the Spanish were coming over here. It says, we, This is the feudal lords who are underneath the kings. This is their oath of obedience. We, who are as good as you, swear to you, who are no better than we, to accept you as our king and sovereign lord, provided you observe all our liberties and laws, but if not, not. So, in effect, they were not really a very, what would you call it, obedient group of folks. So in establishing the mission here, the mission system here, the Crown hoped to avoid this whole mess that they had created. So again, all the encounters with Native Americans in Spanish territory are supposed to go through the missions. This isn't like the British running around giving folks guns and saying, go get deer and bring them back and we'll give you more guns. This is not what happened here. They were not allowed to have guns under the Spanish. What happened here, of course, is tons of mission Indians fled to the British. Because, hey, guns are fun, I guess. So unlike other areas in California and to a lesser extent, even northern Louisiana, the mission system in Florida never flourished. It was poorly supplied, as you guys probably all know this stuff, undermanned. The soldiers were not very obedient and failed to protect the Native Americans as they should, so they got disaffected again and would run away. Disease was always a problem. Again, by 1684, Amelia Island, right here, becomes the northernmost mission in the Spanish holds. As such, it's the administrative center for all of the Wally Indians that are left in the New World.
Where is Santa Catalina? What is that present day?
Santa Catalina was originally on St. Catherine's Island. Let me go back, I probably didn't make that clear. Santa Catalina is on St. Catherine's Island in North Georgia, a barrier island. And then the same group of folks, because they're holding that mission name, it's the same administrative center as far as they're concerned. And to a certain extent, though there were some folks from Sapelo, it's the same group of people that lived there, that moved down here. And that was part of my dissertation research, that you have this continuity in people. So, and there it sat. In 1597, the Harrisons moved in and built a nice house and farmed there. And I guess they sold the property, I forgot to look all this back up. They sold the property in the 1960s or 70s? 62? Thanks. And it was eventually bought by George and Dottie Dorion. And they were starting to build their fabulous retirement home on beautiful Amelia Island plantation. George hated palm trees for some reason, so he was moving to Florida, and he began to have the palm trees removed. And an astute bulldozer driver noticed human remains in the root balls of some of those palm trees. They stopped, incredibly enough, they stopped, they contacted the right people, and before you know it, graduate students, under the command of their major professor, aka me, and Jerry Milanich, ended up going there to excavate the cemetery and get it out of the way. So that's how we started. Excavating, here we are, through the summer and underneath the things. As we were working on this cemetery and just getting into the ground, Jerry Milanich unearthed this map, which says quite clearly, this is the stockade and mission on Isla Santa Maria, which was the name of it then. And so we thought, well, you know, is this all out there? So we did a series of tests. We did a series of post-hole tests, 400 post-hole tests in August, by the way, on the Dorion property here. And we began, oh, that's great, thanks. I'll be careful not to like slam my screen.